Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Cellar Talks, and we are going to talk about Weingut Wittmann today, and we will have Matthias Muller as our guest. So I'm going to ask Matthias to join us in a minute, and for all the audience, welcome to the show. Would be nice if you could tell us what you're drinking today. So if you have a glass of wine, please tell us what it is that you're drinking. Obviously, I will be drinking a Riesling today as we're talking about Weingut Wittmann, but more about that later. So let me get Matthias in the call. Matthias. Just 1 second, please. I see some people that already watched the previous episodes, so welcome back. In the meanwhile, while we're waiting, if you have any questions, you can drop the questions in the question mark box, and it's normally in the bottom of your screen, so we can't keep up with all the questions in the chat, mostly when we're on the show, so the best is to drop your questions in the question mark box. And somebody's already drinking a Riesling, really, and an Albarino, so we got a nice combination here. So I'm checking, one moment please, I'm checking again for Weingut Wittmann. Hey, Matthias.
Finally.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, good as well. Happy that you could make it on this Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a pleasure sharing some interesting news about our wines and having people who, yeah, do the best what you can do in those times, I think. Having fun online.
That's what it is. I mean, obviously, would be nice if we do this live tasting and the live interview at the winery, but that's not possible. So we're going to do it online, and I think a lot of people are very curious about what's happening. I see even a Marius Molitor. I don't know if it's family, but at least we have some people that are very interested about Wittmann, and that's not strange because you're quite a big name at the moment. For the last, well, what can we say, 10, 20 years? It's coming really good together there.
Yeah.
In Westhofen. Yeah.
Yeah, so far, yeah.
Yeah. So for the audience, maybe we can start with a little introduction from your side. So what your background is, what do you do with Wittmann, and then afterwards we will go into what the winery is about, and the vineyards, and of course, obviously the wines, because we're going to taste today as well together one of your Premier Crus, right? Erste Lage. Good.
Correct. Nierstein.
Yeah, Nierstein. Perfect.
Yeah, my name is Matthias, obviously. I'm in charge for all the sales worldwide. I'm the sales director. I'm in the, working with Wittmann since 2013 now. So I started there as an intern in the cellar, kind of a cellar hand, back in 2013. And while I was studying enology and viticulture in Geisenheim University, where more or less everybody else is going to learn all about that in Germany, and then had a couple of other stops in Burgundy and in South Africa, but I was still coming back to Wittmann and to Philipp and his wife Eva, and it's just a fun team. It's great wines, and it's
You've had quite some different experiences, but it keeps drawing you back all the time. And I remember when I was there in the summer, and we did tasting together. We talked also about it. I mean, you're in the sales role now, but you really have a wine background. So obviously, it's not only with wine. It's a lot of times in sales, people are not always really up to date on what's happening in the product level. But I can see, there's the guy with the wine glass, so you know how the wine's made, you know what the status of the vineyards, and you said already you have the education behind it. So I think that's really a good thing to have, because you're living basically the product as well.
Yeah, yeah. And they had to choose somebody who can, just looks good, so they took me.
That's of course understandable. I mean, I didn't want to start with that, but it's good that you're bringing this point up. So maybe I'm going to try, but it's always a question how that works with the pictures. I'm going to share some pictures during the interview. So I have a map which I got from the website, and we can see a little bit here, but I cannot zoom out here, so I'm just going to leave it here for a second. But tell us a little bit about the location of the winery. So before we go into the vineyards, you're in Rheinhessen. Tell us a little bit about Rheinhessen in general as an appellation.
So we're based in the southern part of Rheinhessen. So Rheinhessen in the southwestern part of Germany, and this part of Rheinhessen where we are located is called Wonnegau. This is the most southern part of Rheinhessen. And is really well known for limestone-driven soils, kind of a really interesting terroir, what we do have down in the south of Rheinhessen. And in general, we have 99% of our vineyards is in this part. There's only a little part which is not in the southern part of Rheinhessen, and this is where all the grapes from Nierstein come from, which is up north, closer to Mainz. And Rheinhessen is the largest wine growing area in Germany. We're talking about 25,000 hectares in total. Pfalz is slightly smaller, but Rheinhessen is really diverse, different soil types. We do have volcanic soils more in the eastern part, closer to Nahe River, where Wagner Stempel, for example, is the other great VDP member. And then we have Roter Hang, which is where Gunderloch is, for example, and where Nierstein is from. And then we have the more northern part between Bingen and Mainz, where you do find limestone as well. So it's pretty diverse, and this makes Rheinhessen, I think, really interesting.
I agree. Last summer I spent traveling, going through the 6, I would say, biggest regions in Germany. Rheinhessen was one of the stops, but I put that together with Pfalz and Rheingau. So in 3 days I did the 3 because, you can do it quite central if you're in Wiesbaden, for example. And it's really interesting to see those regions close to each other, but also very different. We had earlier in the show, in the previous season, Weingut Wittmann, who's also a VDP member, and Elizabeth obviously told us also a little bit about the vineyards there and the soils, and we're talking Alzheim then, so it's a little bit, a little part away from Westhofen, but not far. But they're near the Roter Hang, obviously, which is also bringing some different soils. But the limestone, which you're mentioning, is a key, I think, to almost every vineyard that you have, as you said, but also to the wines that you're making. Can you tell us a little bit how the limestone affects the great wines that you are making?
Yeah, well, I mean, limestone is kind of basically geologically was there all part of a million years ago, more tropical area where kind of it was a coral reef, and when the water was gone, what was left behind is those limestones, and limestone does affect our Rieslings in a way that we do have this really salty, fresh crispiness in the wines, which I think all limestone wines do have from great producers. It's not only Rheinhessen, for example, as well in Burgundy too. So and limestone does have really good water saving capacity, and when we're talking about global warming and climate change, that has a positive effect as well on how the vines grow during the year. And in general, limestone, I think, is something super interesting, and especially because there's not too many Rieslings and not too much limestones around in the world. So we're talking mostly about volcanic soils and loamy soils and stuff like that. And for sure, on the upper layer, I mean, when you look at the picture now, this is Kirchspiel, and you see those big stones, which is sandstones as well, and limestone, and you always have kind of like 10-15 centimeters of loamy soils, and then there's the pure limestone rocks. So the vines really dig really deep down in the soil, and is something quite interesting.
It's interesting because obviously one of the other regions I visited was the Mosel, and if you talk about Riesling, of course Riesling, Germany is the best country for Riesling. We don't have to argue about that. But if you compare the regions, it's very different. I mean, there's a lot of slate stone predominantly in the Mosel areas, which obviously works well with the climate, different climates that they have there. It's more up north, and so it has a function as well, next to the fact that it results into different wines as well. But the limestone, like you said, it's the saltiness, it's the kick, I would say, the extra kick that it gives to the wine, which makes it a great wine, because a lot of people that are not so familiar with Riesling, they probably know one sort of style, maybe one sort of soil being used, and then you're missing out a little bit on what a Riesling can do, because Riesling is in fact a good grape that really gets the best out of the soils. So you get this difference because the grape is capable of doing that as well.
Right, and especially because limestone, what limestone does as well, the pH of the soil is pretty interesting. Or somebody wants to see the bottle for sure.
Yeah, of course, we can show it. We're going to show more later, but that's the bottle. We're going to drink it. Yeah.
There you go.
And not the whole bottle, maybe, but it's okay, a little bit.
So the limestone soil as well has the pH of the soil and the pH of the wines are pretty low. So what we're always trying to do, and I guess most of you who are watching maybe already had a glass of Wittmann so far, and for us, good acidity, lively acidity, and well-balanced wines is something which is super important for us, and to reflect where does this wine come from, and limestone helps us for sure, obviously, with that.
Before we go more in depth on that, because obviously the main topic is Riesling, we can't get around that. But you guys make also different wines. Can you tell us a little bit about the different wines that we make, and then afterwards we go into the vineyards that you have? So
the overall, we're doing in total 30 hectares, and from those 30 hectares, we're doing about 70-75% is Riesling. So it's definitely the main variety what we're doing. But for sure, you're not always drinking Rieslings, and in our team, it's Burgundy is something which is always fascinating. So as you see, we're doing as well Pinot Noir. This is the only red grape variety what we're doing. And then we're doing some special stuff like Silvaner, which has a big tradition, Rheinhessen as well.
Mm-hmm.
We do Scheurebe, mostly maybe known from Franconia. It can be, most people do it more in a sweeter style, but we like it bone dry, fermented in big oak cask. So you got this little more fruity exotic style, plus the really bone dry aromatics, which is really interesting. And then, Pinot Blanc and Pinot Gris as well, and Chardonnay. So these are the varieties what we're doing.
And you have the Pinot Blanc you mentioned, the Weissburgunder as well. So, it's interesting because a lot of, I wouldn't say that the youngest generation of winemakers, because I think it started already a little bit earlier, but really got in the rhythm of the Burgundy grapes. I mean, if you look at other great wineries in the area, let's take, for example, Cullin-Guillot, they're also very keen on the Burgundy grapes and wines. And I think it's interesting to see, because a lot of people don't think about that when they think about Germany. Obviously, Riesling is a big part of the German wine culture, but what surprised me a lot this summer is that there are great Chardonnays, there are great Pinots, and I think we should express that as well. So before we go into the whole, let's say, big story around Riesling.
Yeah, and I think it's for sure. I mean, when we look at the sales, is that definitely all the export markets. When we gotta someone's asking for our wines, many people get Rieslings, and Riesling for sure is exported a lot, and that's why most of those Pinot Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir is drinking in Germany, but. We still, we actually just got a new import in China, for example, and they're really hitting on the Pinot Blanc and the Pinot Noir as well. Same story in the US, where they're going crazy about our Pinot Noir from these estate vineyards what we have. So I mean, you deal with Riesling is really unique and outstanding, and there's except Alsace and Austria for sure. there's not many other places where you do Rieslings, and for sure the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir is made more or less all around the world. So that,
do you also think, I mean, I can ask you this because you're in charge of sales and you're in charge of export, but do you also see it rubbing off, the effect of the name of Wittmann rubbing off on these other grapes internationally, or the other varieties, or is that something that's on its own? So, I mean, obviously you got good press over the last decade, or maybe longer even. You've got good scores, so maybe the fan base is growing, and for that people also want to try then other things.
Right, and for sure we're trying to, it's always a game between being famous and focusing on one variety, what you stand for, and what the climate conditions and the soil types you have need to fit to the soils you have and the microclimate, obviously. But for sure we're pulling those people sometimes from Riesling to Chardonnay or Pinot Noir, because even for those grape varieties, we're trying to be elegant and subtle and delicate in style, and I think that's what the people like as well, and they know they could get a good quality for sure.
Yeah. So the question is, how old are the Pinot Noir vines?
The oldest what we got is beginning of the 90s. So back then we did Pinot Noir, and we did some St. Laurent back in the days. But right now we're still doing only Pinot Noir, and we just planted some new clones from Burgundy 3 years ago now in Gundersheim, which is a Premier Cru. So this is really grown on limestone rocks, and this is pretty interesting. So that's what we do. So we're having actually 3 Premier Cru wines: Nierstein, Westhofen, and Gundersheim. And in Gundersheim we're doing a Pinot Noir and Riesling. So you can. It's going to be interesting the next couple of.
So you got some new stuff coming up as well next to
right
the well-known suspects, I would say.
Right.
Good. So we already talked about the hectares. How many bottles do you produce yearly on average?
Yeah, in average it's between 250, 300,000.
Okay. Yeah. Then we're gonna zoom in more on the Riesling. So let's talk about the vineyards first, because I mean they're also important. The Crus, it's not just about the Grand Premier Cru, S02E01, Grosse Lage, but can you tell us a little bit about the big names and what people know you guys from?
Yeah, so when we start at the top, it's definitely, I think, the most important and famous one is Morstein, our Grand Cru, and then right beside Morstein, I mean, the other picture you had with the sides on it, that might be interesting as well, because
which one?
With the different sides you showed us.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that's
first, then a little bit easier to explain.
Yeah.
So in Westhofen, where we're located, there are two hills on the right hand side. So you see those 4 blue spots and blue sides. These are the Grand Cru. So Westhofen is blessed with 4 Grand Cru sites, and we have Aulerde and Kirchspiel, which is on the right hand side of the picture. So Aulerde is kind of a slightly rolling hill, more influenced by sandstone, yellow sandstone, loamy soils, quite a really kind of a tropical style Riesling, a little bit more heavy, more dense. And then you have Kirchspiel, which is left of Aulerde. You see a little bit Kirch on the right hand side of the picture. And this is kind of like an amphitheater, going around this place, and this is more steep slopes. It's southeast facing, and this is much more sandy limestone soils as well, and really elegant style Riesling. And then on top you have kind of a flat plateau, and then you drive by car from Kirchspiel to Morstein and Brunnenhauschen. It's about just 5 minutes, and this is on the other side of Westhofen. And this hill is 100% south facing, and there we have Brunnenhauschen, which is kind of a limestone plus kind of a reddish soil, oxidized iron. Really interesting. So this part of Brunnenhauschen is called Absterde, which someone probably knows from Cellar as well.
Cellar.
And right next to it is Aulerde, and Aulerde is pure limestone rocks, and it's by altitude a little bit higher, so a little bit more a kind of an elegant, racy acidity driven style Riesling. And those are the 4.
So this one was Aulerde, right? Or
yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. It's always hard to do with the picture, also to give an impression about how that looks. Also, you see the hills and the slopes, but Rheinhessen is not known for their big hills. It's more the rolling slopes, I would say. And of course, if we look at some others, I might have some else to show. This one, for example, is Kirchspiel.
This is Kirchspiel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, correct. You see, I already practiced.
Yeah, well,
I didn't put any names on it, so it's I just remember from the picture on your Instagram. You got some nice pictures there, so that makes it easier for us. And here we're looking.
Kirchspiel as well.
There's also Kirchspiel, okay, with the village on the back. Yeah. And another one here.
Probably Morstein.
Yeah.
Top of Morstein, maybe.
Yeah, so a lot of famous vineyards. So the Grand Crus we talked about, but there is, what I think is interesting is obviously you have the Premier Crus, Erste Lage, that are also very, well, all your wines are good, but if you compare it, I would say, for example, I reviewed and tasted recently on Instagram the Westhofen Riesling, and well, we talked a little bit about which wine we wanted to taste, and obviously that was the first idea, which I think was a great idea. But as I already reviewed it, we wanted to do something else. But I think talking about the Westhofen, for example, it is a Erste Lage,
right,
or Premier Cru, but arguably you could also say it's a Premier Cru quality.
Yeah.
Because if you compare to other winemakers, this is top stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, Westhofen. The grapes for the Westhofen is in 2019, and all the other years before. This is always either 95% Morstein or 100% Morstein. Yep. So we only use the best parts of Westhofen, and for us there's nothing more which stands for Westhofen microclimate and soil as Westhofen and as Morstein. So it's this really elegant, subtle, salty style and crispiness what is typical for Westhofen. So we use either a little bit more younger vines, which are too young for us for the Grand Cru Morstein, or there are some parts which are pretty interesting, but which is not the top stuff which needs to get into the Grand Cru. And especially in 2019, for example, there's one small barrel of Brunnenhauschen Grand Cru as well, which we declassified, which got into the Westhofen as well. So the blend of the best parts of Westhofen, and the idea is that. Because I mean, you know, the Grand Cru is always sometimes tough to get and hard to get, and we want to do something which shows a good aging potential. And Westhofen as well is made 100% in big oak casks. Yeah. So
we can show those. I mean, these are for the Pinot, I think, but this ones, this one's, for example.
Right. For example.
The right ones.
Yeah. So fun. Yeah, luckily there's just the left one is Riesling, and so we ferment and vinify it in those barrels. So we, after crushing the grapes, we're doing a little bit of skin contact, and then we were putting the juice in the big oak cask and then just fermented with indigenous yeast. So we're not adding any artificial yeast or stuff like that, because we want a pure extraction of that's the best picture.
Now we see the whole the whole treasure chamber.
Right. Yeah. Underneath the stairs there's the library actually.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So secret tip for the people that didn't know: Westhofen, Riesling, Premier Cru, good stuff. It's it's always difficult to say, and maybe people disagree, but I like to provocate a little bit. But it's maybe a baby Morstein a lot of the times. So I think people are doing a good buy when they're obviously you want to try a Morstein, but like you said, it's difficult because they're sold out pretty quick.
Yeah. Most of it's we just yeah, the demand is higher than what we can produce, and it's still something from nature. So we don't want to.
And yeah, you cannot change that. I mean, we had previously with Bill and Raad the same discussion. I mean, they also, I mean, with their vineyards, it's very different because they have a lot of vineyards, but all very small. And they also get the question every year because they sell out with the Bill and Raad Lurton. Why don't you make more? And it's already for years and years. And yeah, we talked, Jean and I talked about it, and his father, DJ, who created then the winery, has also been asked many times, but it's not that easy because even if you would have additional vineyards or potentially vineyards that you could cultivate, that's going to take time. It's not sure that's going to bring you the same thing. In the end, the vineyards are depending on the nature, on the climate. So, and then we're only talking about the grapes and the vines. We're not talking about the production and the cellar, etc., obviously, because that is also made to a volume.
Yeah, and it's when people buy wine, I think the price quality ratio is important. And what we bottle, we want to have like 100% the best quality, and we rather say, let's reduce the final blend of Morstein 500 liters, 1,000 liters less, but instead have the best quality.
Yeah.
And this is always, it's all about the quality, nothing else. And
you also already mentioned the declassifying. It's just what you guys do. I mean, some people would say, okay, we're just gonna go for Brunnenhauschen because, well, we can, but it's a choice that you make, that you, in that case, say, okay, we're not gonna do it because it's not the standard that we want. No.
Right.
So here on the picture, we see the harvest, and we see Philip. Also, the winery is also very old. We didn't talk about that, but it's been around for quite some centuries already.
Yeah, we thought 1663 is quite a nice
number.
So yeah, the grandfathers of Philip and Philip's parents, were around this area already for quite a long time, and it actually was Philip's father who, what was quite typical in Rheinhessen back then, that it was kind of a agriculture plus viticulture, farming style, and Philip's father decided to go on 100% viticulture, and as well to go for organic back in the, and that was, everybody was like, hey, you're
it's costing you only a lot of work and money.
Yeah, and then nobody was experienced, so back then it was a risk as well to do it, because there's now, all the universities doing research about different spraying methods and all this stuff, but back then nobody really cared. I mean, back in those days it was I guess only Nicolas Joly mostly is doing it in Loire Valley, and when Philip's first vintage, when he got back from university to the estate in 1990, 2000, in those days, he more or less started thinking about, hey, why don't we do biodynamic? So since 2003, we're doing biodynamic as well.
17 years already. I have people pay attention, because I see biodynamic popping up every now and then with wineries now new, but 17 years already certified there.
Right. So it's at the end, all this organic biodynamic is super, super important, and it just helps us to, on the one hand, deal better with the global warming and stuff like that, and on the other hand, it just gives us you see those picture perfect grapes to produce better grapes, and as a matter of fact, it gets you better wine at the end of the day, and those two things, organic and biodynamic, helps us to make better wine. But for us, it's always, we're not
you're not in there for the marketing.
No, because and on the other hand, we see it more as a quality booster for us, and as well saving the environment. So those two things.
Yeah, comes hand in hand. Good. So let's go into the tasting, because obviously we have some other things we want to discuss, but this might be a nice, let's say, interruption for us. Yeah. So today we are tasting, I have a problem that I can't get my pictures out of the screen, so it might sound a bit strange, but for that reason I'm not that big, so you're helping me out here. Very good. So we're tasting today the Nierstein, the Premier Cru, 2018 was it, or 19? I forgot. Yeah, perfect. So the fresh one.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more, obviously, first about Nierstein and then about this vintage or the wine in general, what you...
Yeah, so maybe talking a little bit about the vintage and 19 was, I'm a big fan of 2019. 19 is just so incredible, fresh and really kind of a classic Riesling style from kind of before we got some a little bit warmer vintages like 2018. And for sure you know how to deal with it, but 19 we were really lucky that right before harvest we got kind of like a cool climate area. And this really helps to get really cold nights, and cold nights always gets you a better refreshing acidity. And so 19 we're super happy. Nice grapes, no hail, nothing else what kind of disturbed us. And Nierstein is, as I said, we do 3 Premier Crus, 2 in the Westhofen, so Westhofen and Gundersheim, which is more or less close to each other, next to each other. And then we have Nierstein, which is Rote Hang.
Yeah.
By car, it's about half an hour drive north towards Frankfurt. And Nierstein is something really interesting because it's not limestone. It's Rote Hang in German. So reddish soil, oxidized stuff. And this is, it's just interesting having something different in your cellar, you know, when you're tasting the barrels, and it's always, limestone, great stuff. But then you're happy that, oh, wow, there's something from Rote.
I get some recognition from the one that we tasted with Rappenhof. That was a Dienheim Ortswein, but there they have 2 or 3 different. They use grapes from 2 or 3 different soil types. So of course they can mix out a little bit because it's more their area. Like you said, for you it's a little bit off the track compared to the rest. But what do we get when we first open up this bottle? Because we need to give it some air, because the first time when I poured it in the glass, obviously it needs to get out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is still a baby. So it was bottled last summer. So it's only half a year in the bottle, more or less. Yeah. You see that it's still reductive. So the wine for sure needs to open up and to aerate. And then Nierstein this is a blend of 2 different sites. So we have Orbel and we have Ölberg, so 2 Grand Cru sites. But we decided that we want to keep the Grand Crus for Westhofen area. So we would be allowed to do 4 Grand Crus there, but we said, we don't know. The first vintage what we did with Nierstein is 2014. So we're still, in a more or less experienced time to get to know the vineyards better and better. And maybe this will be one time where we're going to do a Grand Cru, but now we stick with the Premier Cru.
That's an interesting story, because obviously people don't get that off the label or on the website when they see it. And then if you compare to the other ones that are more based on limestone, more or less, what are the big differences in the notes and the aromas that we're getting here?
So for me in Nierstein, when we're talking about the nose, it's right now it's a little bit reductive, but as well you always have a little bit more kind of those really ripe apple peach aromatics. So it's a little bit more those Yellowstone fruits, which are really typical of Rote Hang. So it's a little bit more going on, more fruit driven than Westhofen, for example, compared to that. And then on the palate, you got, on the one hand, you got the really nice refreshing acidity, and on the other hand, you got this creamy touch. And this is really typical for Rote Hang as well. You always have this slightly, it's more dense than Westhofen, for example. It's a little bit more put together, everything, more, in a good way, more hard, more powerful.
More in your face a little bit, I would say. Yeah.
And where compared to Westhofen, for example, limestone is always a little bit more elegant, more subtle. And Nierstein is really strong, fruit-driven, good acidity, well-balanced, round. And this is always, 2019 was a perfect vintage for Rote Hang. It was a little bit colder. because Roter Hang, it's east facing, but it's reddish soil, and this always it's a warmer microclimate than what we have in Westhofen, for example.
Yeah.
So I prefer Nierstein really when it needs time for sure, but I prefer the colder vintages because it just has a little bit more acidity and more going on the palate.
Yeah. So these wines, obviously, they're made to last. All the Rieslings, but also the other ones, but the Rieslings particularly. I mean, no problem in putting them away for decades. But it starts giving away itself more after, let's say, 5 years, 5 to 8 years. Or what do you guys normally think it takes for a Riesling to develop?
I'm not a big, actually, when
it's a preference, I know.
For Premier Cru, I think 5 to 10 years is perfect. I like it if it's old, because it just shows much more where it's coming from. Right now, if it's young, you can drink it as well, because now it's kind of more expressive. Kind of like an espresso in the morning, which lights you up. But then it just needs a little bit more time for sure.
I think I always give the suggestion: never buy one bottle, at least buy 2, or if you can a box, because then you get this these really different levels that the wine is capable of giving away. So in the meanwhile, for everybody, if you have any questions, you can also drop them in the question mark box, because then we get them separately. Because sometimes and I say it a couple of times, I just don't see them in the chat. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the question mark box.
Somebody asked where you can get the wine. So for sure, somebody wrote in Gute Weine, for sure, from Germany.
Yeah.
And, in the Netherlands, our importer is not directly selling to private customers, but in Amsterdam, for example, it's Chabrol who have our wine.
Yeah, you guys are really represented in quite a lot of countries, so that's a good thing. I mean, you got good channels set up, so in that perspective, it's and even like you said, if you're living in Holland, it's possible to get them from Germany. It's not limited to that. Maybe also we forgot to mention it at the beginning, but it's a nice thing to know, because some people, a lot of people maybe don't know, but if you look on the website, you find out that you have a sister, well, it's not a sister winery, but you have 2 wineries you attend to, basically. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so Philipp Wittmann's wife, Eva, she runs, her family owned estate in the Mosel, in Trittenheim, in the middle part of the Mosel. And this is called Ansgar Klüsserath. It's called Ansgar because her father's name is Ansgar. Where we do classic Mosel style wines, dry and off dry, but we're definitely focused on dry wines. And the single vineyard, what we mainly do is Apotheke. Trittenheim Apotheke, I guess one of the most famous, for sure, compared with Wählner Sonnenuhr and all those guys from Prim or Fritz Haag, or a couple of great sites. And this is in Trittenheim, really small. We're just doing 5 hectares. So, and they're with Chabrol as well in Amsterdam, for example.
Yeah, because you guys can, even if you also go on the website, you have this combined overview as well, so people can switch easily between the 2. So I always recommend them to go and have a look, because you guys do all the sales and the marketing. Basically, you try to cluster as well for the 2 wineries, right?
Yeah, we're trying to put that together.
Yeah,
there's
that
one
makes
question
sense.
Regarding our importer in the US. It's Lawson Brothers. And you can buy online. It's mostly about wine.com is selling our stuff in the US as well.
Yeah. So a question about tasting notes, but I know, and you guys are doing a good job there, that you also put online on the website, well, I would say the tasting notes, but a nice overview, including a review or description of the wines, right?
Right, yeah. Just go on our website and select Morstein, and then you can find the tasting and all the reviews for Morstein 2018.
Yeah, perfect. So then maybe, well, I don't want to make it about that, but we can't get around that as well. The awards, because the wines are, like I said, well received already for the last, I would say, 20 years is going really up. I mean, it has to do with, it started obviously, like you said, with Philip's father that started to focus really on the on wine making and wine growing and making. But then Philipp took over. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened and how that changed? How it changed? Because now it's easy. People can see the score, and they see 100 points last year, which is well, absolutely great. But what happened there? Because quite a lot of things happened in the past decades too.
Yeah, I think one of the key things what I said is that biodynamics is really driving you not only in terms of changing stuff and not using stuff, but using new stuff like all the cow horns and cow shit and what you do. Biodynamics as well helps to kind of rethink everything and questions a lot of things. How does nature affect the vines, during the growing seasons? How can we use the moon and stuff like that to improve our quality, the quality of the grapes, and then the quality of the wines? And I think it has a lot to do as well with getting to know your area, your vines, and how to work with them. Yep. In the cellar, our winemaking is pretty boring in this way because
it didn't change too much then.
No, because we don't want to. We're using big oak casks, we're using indigenous yeast, and then we bottle it. So we don't really like the word kind of winemaking. We're not adding any stuff here and here, and
you're letting the terroir speak and the grapes speak.
Right. Basically. So it's much more about what's happening in the vineyard. And the difference is from when we're talking about our classification model as well, that when we're going from estate Riesling, which is kind of similar to Bourgogne Blanc when we're talking about Burgundy, up to Grand Cru, it's for sure the site itself where it is and what soil type we have, but it's mainly as well about the yields. So that the yields in the Grand Cru vineyards are much lower than in the estate wines, for example.
Yeah. So you're really selecting very strict on which grapes make it, which doesn't, and that affects obviously, like you said, the yields. But that's in the end, it benefits the wine in general. It creates a better, a greater wine, basically.
Yeah, and so those ratings, it's it's a love and hate relationship.
Yeah. Well, you might as well deal with it because you got them now. So
I mean, you can't do anything about it. So sometimes you get ratings and you didn't send any samples. People just rate your wines, and for sure we're lucky and really happy that we got such good ratings. But it's it's still ratings.
But it's not a surprise for you when it comes to the vintage, right? Because we talked about 2019, and you already said, well, we saw a lot of things coming together pretty well. So in that perspective, you were also thinking about this is going to be a great vintage. You don't know until the end, obviously, but
Yeah, I mean, 19 for sure is, I think, from the last years. But I also like, for example, 2015 is incredibly nice as well, and 16 or 17 as well. And I think from all the really good producers, it's not about the quality of a vintage. It's more about a personal style you like.
It's an expression of the year, which the wine comes from.
Some people like a little bit more creamy, balanced dance, for example, and others like it. Yeah, for me personally, the more acidity a wine has, the more I love it. But it's not really a popular way of seeing it.
Oh, but like you said, everybody has their own preference in that. But people can be assured that the quality always is good because you're, like we said, very selective in what you choose and what you which you use and what you don't use, and you're not overgrowing basically the vineyards that you have at the moment. No.
It's for example, we don't use any fertilizer as well. So vines, you need to have a well-balanced growth, and that's super important. The humus, we're using humus a lot, and this is something super interesting for us because you need a lively soil. What's going on there as well, and
now there is the question, obviously, what can we expect from 2020? I mean, already tell us a little bit about where we're going, because it's not that far off. The bottling starts next month?
We're bottling the estate wines mid of March. Normally we're doing during pro wine because it's the most relaxing time of the year, having pro wine and watching.
It's a bit different now.
2020. Actually, the guy who asked the question is the export manager of Robert Weil. So hello.
Good. The competition is tuning in here. It's not competition. I know you guys look at it very differently, and that's what I mean. Sorry to interrupt you, but what surprised me also in Rheinhessen, the winemakers have a good relationship among each other and the employees at the wineries, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And the VDP is so small in Rheinhessen. I know Elisabeth from Rappenhof pretty well and pretty good. And we're a small. I mean, in these
small club,
the niche where we produce wines, and it's a small club,
So he wants to know what do you expect for 2020?
2020 is again a year. I mean, sometimes it seems strange talking about all the vintages being great and having
super vintage after another super vintage.
It's a little bit confusing sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, should I really tell it that it's great again? But actually it was. So here we are. And 2020 is in general, it's something between 2018 and 2019 in the way the wine tastes. So we're doing lots of cast samples at the moment and tasting and doing the final blends. And 2020 is super elegant, and it has the fruitiness of 2019 and kind of a little bit the freshness of 2019 and the fruitiness of 2018. So it's not as dense and concentrated at 18, but it doesn't have it's not as acidity driven as 2019. So I like the style because it's more a charming in a good way. So kind of it comes to you. 19 like hits you in your face like a and 2020 will be more like 2016. So it's more like this shy guy in the bar, sitting alone.
Yeah.
Then you need to get in touch with him to talk to him. So this is a little bit funny.
But then when you open up the conversation, there's a really nice story coming out.
Yeah.
Good. So even people from Brazil, well, very good. I mean, I don't know what time it is in Brazil, but I'm guessing it's not 8 o'clock in the evening there. Okay, what I always do is I ask my previous guest, do you have any question for the next guest? Or actually, I asked them to give me a question for the next guest. So last week we were talking with Jamit, who created a great thing called the Wine Puzzles. It's basically puzzles about wineries. Maybe you saw it, I don't know.
I watched it,
Yeah, they're really cool. So actually, I think for the audience, because I know there's people interested there, the web shop or the sales go live on the 8th of February with her. So then people can start getting the first wine puzzles. Germany is not among the countries that she started first, but we talked about it with her. I talked about it with her. I said she should do it. So she was going to do one from Germany. But her question for you was, if you would not be in the wine making business or wine selling business in your case as well, what would you do? Because it sounds like it's really a passion for you, but maybe you could have taken a different direction there.
Well, actually, before I studied winemaking in Geisenheim, I studied economics at the University of Cologne. So, I was really thinking about going into research and at a bank in Frankfurt. Did an internship there, but then, I don't know why something hit me, and I said, no, stop. You want to do something fun. And, it was pretty close that I kind of like suited up every day and do something serious. And now I'm just sitting here drinking wine and talking about it. So it's just perfect.
I think you've got a great job. So I'm sometimes a little bit envious about you, but and then again, I can come and taste at the winery in the summer, and then we do this show. So I get my share of Wittmann. Luckily, I have to say. Next week we have a very different story. Well, it's not that different because we have Domaine de la Solitude. My French is not as good as my German is, but the family Lancon from the Rhône, and they're actually 8 generations. So we're going in the same direction, 1620. So also very old, and known for their Châteauneuf du Pape.
Yeah, yeah,
So
nice.
that's a very different area, very different wines. We got the big boulders or the round stones there on the soils. You got a nice question for our guest for next week about maybe the region, the winery, or well, something else.
Maybe
You can think about it in a minute because we can also ask if the audience still has some questions. If you have any questions, that gives you some time to think. In this case, if you have any questions, drop them in the question mark box. I didn't have any new ones coming in there, or you can now put them in the chat because it's not going that fast, so I can keep up with them. And one of the questions that I still had is, what is your personal favorite when it comes down to the Wittmann wines?
Mm-hmm. It really depends on the time of the year. So during summer, I'm drinking lots of Riesling, and for sure, actually, I'm a big fan of the estate Riesling and the Riesling from Kalkstein. So between the estate Riesling and the Westhofener, because this is just a great category of having a nice price quality ratio, comes from the younger vines of the Westhofener part of the Westhofen area. And this is so salty, it's just goes really well with fish, with grilled fish, and when you're doing barbecue. So this is actually my favorite wine.
Yeah. And any other, if we look outside Wittmann, so now we could pick different regions and different styles. Is there anything you want to complement that Riesling with?
I'm a big fan of Weingut Huber for sure from Baden. Good friend of mine. We were doing the internship together in South Africa. So we had a couple of nights in Stellenbosch where we don't want to talk about this.
But that made a really real impression there.
So I'm a big fan of Huber when it comes to Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and as well. Yeah, I'm a big Pinot Noir and Chardonnay fan. So I love those. For me, those two varieties plus Riesling is just all-time favorite. And for sure, if you can afford it, Burgundy, it's always
Always
nice.
a pleasure.
Yeah.
So I got another question in that's related to the VDP, because you've got quite a history with the VDP as well. Philipp personally, but also the winery is already quite a long time for a member. So what is the values that you take away from the VDP, and how does the VDP help you in this case to maybe promote the wines, or what does it add to the winery, basically? That's
I think in general, the VDP it's a private organization, and the VDP, what the VDP does is to focus on high quality wines and high quality estates in Germany, and the VDP is, for me, it's always a sign that those estates really take care about quality and really care about what they're doing, and want to produce every day the best wines. And for me, the VDP, especially for sure, the topic Grand Cru and establishing this classification about years and years and years. It's not always easy, with those different members, different ways of thinking about special topics. But the VDP, what they did, and especially establishing the GG, the Grand Crus, as a brand with this model and everything, this is just, it's huge. And the tasting in Wiesbaden, and they did one. I mean, we would have done something in Rotterdam last year with VDP, and they're doing one in London. And it's especially in the export markets and in Germany, it's just a sign of high quality wine. So big respect for those guys working for this organization every day. So, but it's always a good friendship you have. So.
Yeah, and I think it's important because obviously when I was in the Mosel in the summer, was the first stop, Heimann Lowenstein, and I talked to Reinhard, and we were talking about that the Riesling at one point was the most expensive wine and well known and most sought after wine in the world. So when the Titanic went down, there was still some hefty priced Riesling on the menu there. I mean, that was even before all the popularity that there is now with Burgundy wines. We talked about it. Okay, if you can afford them, nice, but sometimes it really gets blown through the roof. In Germany, it's a little bit of a different story, and a lot of things happened over the last 100 years, I would say. But I think, and I agree with you there, that it's really going upwards in a trend in terms of recognition for, let's say, the product, German wine in general, also Riesling, but not just about the Riesling. So I think that's really a good added value because it's come from a long way, and also the way the wines are produced, which wines, etc. But now we're talking about something really different with single vineyard wines, etc., and the recognition behind these vineyards.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree. Yeah.
So we don't have any questions anymore coming in now. So then we can go back to the question that I had for you. Maybe in the meanwhile you were thinking about something for our family and uncle.
Yeah, what is the oldest bottle they have in their private library?
That's a good question, because if you're that old, I always hope people save a lot of their wines, because I know that was not always, let's put it like that, not always a tradition to keep wines. And I talked to Elizabeth about it. They have quite some older ones in stock, but I know a lot of the wineries just sold out, didn't think about keeping one and some in their library. But yeah, it's really a cool thing to open up these really old bottles and see what happens. So we're going to write that down, and then we're going to come back on that in the next episode. So there is a question: what's your favorite German beer? That's a good one. Let's break it up and go away from wine for a while.
I'm actually a big fan of Tegernseer.
I don't know. I drink quite some German beer, but that's a new one for me. Where does it come from?
Tegernsee is a lake south of Munich.
Yeah.
It's run by monks, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Like most of those guys down in Bavaria, and it's called Tegernseer Hell.
Okay, well, sounds interesting. Let's. I should try next time when I can get one. And excellent. We're getting the remarks here as well. So good choice. Then question is, with the increase of artisan beers, does this influence the smaller vineyard? Let's really dive into that, because now we're talking about beer. It's a thing, artisan beer.
Yeah, well, in Germany, I think, as far as I know, the law of how to make beer is much more strict than in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
So like the crazy Belgians with their cherry, whatever.
Yeah.
Here's what they
cherry, not beer, but cherry water, cherry flavored.
Yeah. I like more the classic style, and I'm a big fan of Kölsch as well. So in the city of Cologne, I mean, I studied there, so it's
you're not afraid of the uprise, especially not in Germany, but of the uprise of artisan beer compared to.
I think it's same. I mean, it really depends on, I don't know, what are you eating? I mean, some dishes work, I think, much better with beer than with wine.
I agree.
It's hot summer, 40 degrees. Sometimes, I love beer, and especially during harvest time, we're drinking tons of beer.
Okay. Another question is the increase in quality in relation to the global warming. Well, this topic always comes back, global warming, especially when I talk to German winemakers, especially in the cold Germany. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So I know you guys, this is a topic that you're really looking into, so it's a good one, and I'm happy that we're still going to discuss this, the climate effect.
Yeah, for us, to be honest, we're still, I mean, it's hard to say, but we're still benefiting from global warming.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's 20 years ago, when you speak with Mr. Wittmann, Philipp's father, in the 60s and 70s, when you listen to those guys, what was going on in Germany, it was
hard to get a good harvest.
Right, from 10 vintages, there were like 3, maximum 4 vintages where you got really fully ripe grapes.
Unbelievable.
So that had an effect that many of those guys made more sweet wines, because then the acidity is not burning your stomach.
Yeah.
So
it masks.
Right, and makes it just more balanced at the end. And we're now really happy that we have every year fully ripe grapes. But for sure, we're afraid, and for sure, we especially in warm vintages like 2018, for example, we're really lucky that we just got a new vineyard, which was on top of the hill, where it was slightly colder than in the middle and down in the hill, in the valley. So for us, it's not a question of planting different varieties. It's more a question of maybe those sides, because in Germany and all in the northern hemisphere, the top sides are always south facing.
Yeah.
But maybe we have to rethink all of that, and maybe the north facing sides are better now because they're colder, and for sure the soil has to work with it, and it needs to be interesting soil. But
you really need to plan and think ahead more than I mean, that was always the case, but now even more than in the past. And I know that you guys are always on the look for new sites, or maybe, and it doesn't need to be far away. Like you said, it can be close, but if you look at different facing directions, for instance. So that's a topic that you guys are always working on, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, because we're not planning on planting Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot or stuff like that. I mean, it would work at the moment, you know, when you look at the sunshine days and all these data you have about weather and stuff, and those grapes would work in Germany, and they do work. I mean, they're great blends, like Bordeaux blends are made in Pfalz area, for example, from Rings, Das Kreuz, the top blend. Bordeaux blend is absolute gorgeous. But for us, it's more about looking for vineyards which are colder, because I think there's not really a market for Merlot from Rheinhessen. So we stick to Riesling and try to make our best. And it's still, you know, you're experiencing a lot. So it's not always about the first thing what pops into your mind is just like harvest earlier. Then the sugar levels are not getting that high. But yeah, it needs to be in balance. You know, it doesn't matter. You don't really get anything if you have a racy acidity but unripe grapes who taste like, I don't know, any vegetable.
It needs to complement, and that's what makes Riesling so great, that it can, it's a grape that can do these both sides, but if you have not enough of one or the two, then it also doesn't come across, then you lose basically a lot of potential. An interesting question. It's also a difficult one because I think it's a more personal preference. But I don't know anything about German wines. What would you recommend to start discovering? So talking about Wittmann now for a second.
Yeah, I mean, start with Riesling. Start with dry style Rieslings, and then and don't forget the Burgundy, like Pinot Blanc and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And I would recommend going from I don't know, doing like a south to north tour for the different wine areas in Germany.
Yeah. I think it's a great advice, but I also think that talking about Chardonnay, for example, which is not something that people think about when they think about Germany, but like we said, it's really improving, and a lot of good Chardonnay is coming from there now. But I think German Chardonnay would also be a good choice. And why is because if you compare it to Chardonnays from other countries, it's not that expressive fat and over woody, and that I think is a good thing, because you really get also the soil influences there, and there are some good soils suitable for that.
Yeah, I mean, Chardonnay is a big hit, and even in our domestic market. So Chardonnay made in oak, but well made in oak, is a big hit, and everybody's going crazy about good Chardonnays, and
It's interesting because I personally am not really a fan, but then when this summer, when obviously you go to taste, and a lot of the winemakers, they have also a Chardonnay, you also taste the Chardonnay, it changed my perspective quite a lot, because like I said, I'm not a big fan of the oak used a lot in Chardonnay, and with Germany that doesn't happen that much. So it's a different style, but for a lot of people it might be a nice try.
Right, 100%.
So let's see if we have another question, but I think we're getting through it right now. This is an interesting one. When people say make better wines than Cellar, how does that make you feel? I mean, we talked about competition, but Cellar, for the people that don't know, I mean, this is, if we talk about the top wineries in Germany, they're certainly there, along with Wittmann, I think, but very different. But you are in the same arena, because the Vineyards.
Right. we have sometimes the vineyards are just close next to each other. So
Yeah.
you know, it's for me, this is not about any competition. It's about how can we bring back Germany and especially Rheinhessen back on the map for all the wine connoisseurs around the world. And especially when you look at Rheinhessen, which used to be more famous for potatoes than for wine 30 years ago, we had
You come from a long way.
right. We had to work really, really hard to get there. And so I'm personally super happy about every great wine which comes from Rheinhessen. And because everybody is so small, you know, it's not a competition. We have to, we have to allocate our Premier Cru and Grand Cru wines. And it was a long way to get there, but at the end, we're happy. And I personally love the wines from Cellar. It's outstanding quality. It's a different style, a different Riesling style, what he does than we do. So
I think you're making a fair point. I mean, it's come to a point that, and family Keller cannot do anything about that, I think, but it's come to a point that if you want to get your hands on a bottle of Keller, well, you need to sell an arm and a leg and be very lucky. And it's also difficult with your, especially with the Grand Crus, but in the end, people can experience a certain area and certain vineyards in different ways, obviously. And like you said, there is some great producers in this area, also in Rheinhessen. And if you just look around a little bit, you can get this experience, even if you can't get this one bottle that everybody wants, basically, because also they have the problem that they can't make more than they do at the moment.
Right. And that's so it's not against, it's nothing like against, there's no competition between Keller and us. It's a good friendship. Philipp and Klaus-Peter Keller know each other for quite a long time. I think they're even the same age. Philipp is slightly younger, I guess, maybe. I don't know. So it's perfect. It's a good friendship. All good.
And building on the question, which wine would you recommend to start with? There's also the follow-up, why not the classic Alsace wine? I mean, for the people that are not that familiar with the difference between Alsace Riesling and German Riesling.
Yeah, I mean, there are really great producers in Alsace, and sometimes it's not 100% in my style, but it's I mean, it's a little bit warmer. When we're talking about the microclimate from Rheinhessen to Alsace, I guess. But there's a lot of great producers, Leon Bayer and all those guys, great winemakers as well. It's mostly a little bit more oxidized style.
Yeah.
We're pretty reductive and really sharp and straight ahead in our way of thinking the wines and making the wines. And more racy acidity than sometimes maybe Alsatian Riesling have. They're a little bit more open and more fruit driven than what we have, I guess.
Okay. Last question, because we're already past the hour, which I don't mind, but maybe you want to go home at some point.
I'm home anyway, so it's all right.
Sorry?
I'm home anyway, so.
Oh, that's good. I mean, then I can take the bottle that I have and pour myself a little bit more, because actually my glass was running out. But the question that we got, and we talked a little bit about this topic as well, the name of Riesling in the world. Why do you think it still has this, for a lot of people, scares people still a little bit, Riesling? I think it's a misconception, but can you maybe explain why it is with people that they think about that?
I really guess that in the 70s and 80s and even in the 90s, a lot of really, really big producers messed up the image of Riesling worldwide. When we're talking about Black Tower and Blue Nun and all those shitty stuff, which is made by big companies for super low prices. People didn't really recognize Riesling as a interesting, high quality grape variety. For many people outside of Germany and maybe outside of Europe as well, Riesling is just like, cheap and sweet. And now people are getting, for sure, they're still, I think sometimes they're anxious about the acidity. But you know, when you show them sometimes the the data of how much acidity our Rieslings have and how much acidity their champagne has, what they're drinking time to time. They're like, oh, fuck. Yeah, because champagne have much more acidity and lower pH is what we have in our Riesling. So, yeah, people need to
it
drink
balances,
it.
and this is a great thing we talked about it. It balances out well in the Riesling. So because there is the acidity, but it finds its way, and it's not never really let's say irritating in that sense. Yeah. Okay. I think there was one question about the aging potential. Well, I think we talked about it, but aging potential. I mean, we're talking about decades here, but I think I don't know what obviously the history is very long for the winery, and we talk about the oldest wine for our next guest. But with you guys, obviously, it's a different story because a lot of things happened over the past 2 decades as well. But what do you open every now and then, or maybe you get an occasion to open something old or older, and what would that be, and how do you think that develops?
For me, the wines make a kind of Riesling always has this. It's the first one. Our Riesling, we're talking about our Rieslings, is that you do have those first half year where you still got this fruity fresh aromatics, what we have now with the Niersteiner, and then they're kind of closing and not showing too much fruit, and it's really, you need to aerate them for quite a long time, but then after 3 years they're opening up, and what they got when they're young is kind of like this baby like aromatics, so a little bit more heavy style, and the older they get, the more mineral driven are they. So the older they get, it's much more about limestone and saltiness, and they're losing the fruitiness. It's like, when you're going out and using perfume, and the next day the perfume's gone away, and you see the real guy behind behind all the makeup and stuff, and that is kind of the same thing what happens to our Riesling. So after 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, it's getting more and more sharp, more balanced, and for sure Rieslings get this a little bit more nutty aromatics when it's getting older, but I like it, and I think when the yields are so low, you're taking so much care about the quality. You want the wines to age, and so I think 10-20 years is just perfect.
I agree totally. So thank you. With that, we're over time. Questions stopped. So if we wait a little bit longer, new questions will come. But let's leave it to this, Matthias. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope I can come back in the summer again, depending on Corona. But well, let's hope that it all gets better soon.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Everybody, shoot us an email, and when all those crazy COVID-19 times over, you're more than welcome to come to the estate and visit us and taste our wines. So
and I could testify you got a great tasting. I'm not sure if it's gonna be with you, but I mean, if they get you, then they're lucky, because that was a great tasting. So thank you very much for your time again. Have a nice evening, and
you too.
Good luck with releasing 2020.
Yeah, thank you very much, and
okay.
For watching. See you soon.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So for everybody, next week we're going to talk about the Rhône, and we're going to talk about Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So a very different topic, obviously. We're going into the red wines, Famille Lacon, and then it's going to be a nice, great show again. Stay tuned. Watch on the website. We've just released the next episodes for this new season. So if you have any suggestions or questions, always feel free to drop them in. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening, and I'm going to enjoy this nice glass and bottle of Nierstein Riesling.